My little brother sent me a voicemail of my parents laughing about draining my savings, so I drained their story instead. My name is Mara Ellison, I'm 34. I'm a certified fraud examiner in Columbus, Ohio, and I spend my career finding the exact place where a story stops matching the numbers. On a Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a voice memo from my little brother, Cole. The caption read, "Don't be mad, just listen." I put in my earbuds at my desk and pressed play. My father's voice filled my head, easy and amused. "She'll cover it, she always covers it." My mother laughed, that soft, satisfied laugh I'd heard my whole life. "She thinks it's love, it's a paycheck with a heartbeat." I closed the memo. On my second monitor, a spreadsheet was already open, 11 years of transfers, $191,000. I typed one line back to Cole. "I know now, I have proof." That reply would end my parents' 30-year marriage renewal party, their vacation condo, and the last person on earth still writing them a check. But not yet. First, I had 11 years of records to put in order. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Mara, 34, and this is the story of how a 90-second voicemail confirmed what $191,000 in family help had actually been buying. If you've ever been the one person in your family who gets called when the bill is due and never invited when the celebration starts, subscribe and stay to the end, because this one has a receipt for every single lie. Walter and Renee Ellison met at a community college in southern Ohio and married before either of them had finished a degree. My father worked in HVAC repair on and off, depending on his mood about authority. My mother did the books for a dentist's office for exactly 2 years before deciding office work wasn't her energy. They had 2 children 3 years apart, me first, Cole second. By the time I was 9, I understood the shape of my job in that house, even if nobody said it out loud. I made my own lunches. I made Cole's lunches. On nights my mother's nerves were bad, which was most nights, I made dinner too, standing on a step stool at the stove until I was tall enough not to need it. My father used to introduce me to the guys from his crew like I was a tool he was proud of owning. "This one doesn't need to be told twice," he'd say, tapping my shoulder like I was a truck that started on the first try. I took that sentence and built an entire identity around it. If I was useful enough, early enough, quiet enough, I would matter, I would be safe, I would belong. Cole learned something different sitting 3 feet away from me at that same kitchen table. He learned that someone else would always handle it. My mother never once corrected the imbalance because the imbalance served her. 2 small hands doing the dishes, and neither pair belonged to her son. The word everyone used for me was steady. Relatives said it at Easter. My middle school guidance counselor wrote it on a recommendation letter. "Mara is remarkably steady for her age." I wore that word like an achievement badge for years before I understood it was actually a leash. The steady one doesn't get to have a bad day. The steady one gets the phone call first when the furnace breaks and gets left off the list last when the guest list for something good gets finalized. I was 9 years old and I had already been cast in a role I didn't choose and wouldn't fully understand the price of for another 25 years. I got a job bagging groceries the summer I turned 15, 3 shifts a week plus Saturdays. I liked it more than I expected. Everything had a place, everything scanned to a number, and numbers, unlike people, didn't have moods. That same summer, my father's company cut back his hours. He came to me on a Sunday evening, sat across from me at the kitchen table like he was about to ask something enormous, and said, "Mara, I need $150 for the gas bill, just until things settle." I gave it to him without hesitating. 2 months later, it was $300 for a truck repair. By my 16th birthday, $300 a month wasn't the exception, it was the baseline. I asked once, only once, if things were getting better. My father put a hand on the back of my neck the way he did when he wanted a conversation to end gently but firmly. "This is just how families work, kiddo, we take care of each other." I believed him the way you believe a smoke detector when it's silent, because silence feels like proof that nothing's burning. Meanwhile, Cole turned 16 and got a hand-me-down truck from my uncle, fully paid off, keys on a ribbon. I bought my own car at 19 with money I'd saved between 2 jobs. Nobody put a ribbon on it. Nobody asked why the family that needed $300 a month from their teenage daughter could still afford a truck, free and clear, for their teenage son. I didn't ask either. Steady doesn't mean suspicious. Steady means you assume the math works out because you're doing your part of it. There was a particular Sunday I still think about sometimes, the winter I turned 17. I'd picked up a 4th shift at the grocery store to cover a request for back rent, And I came home after close to find the porch light off and a note on the counter in my mother's handwriting. Went to bed early, long day. Don't wake us. I stood in the kitchen in my work apron, still smelling like the deli counter, and ate cereal standing over the sink because nobody had thought to leave anything out for me. Upstairs, I could hear the television still on in my parents' room, low murmurs of a late-night show drifting through the vent. Not asleep, just done being available. I didn't think much of it at the time. That was simply the texture of an ordinary night in that house. It took me another 15 years to understand that a note telling you not to wake anyone is its own kind of message. The requests never came with an apology attached, and they never came with a plan for how the pattern might end. They came with urgency, and urgency, I'd learn much later, is one of the oldest tools in the book. Urgency doesn't leave room for questions. It only leaves room for a decision made in under 60 seconds, usually the same decision as the month before. College was 4 years of night shifts at a call center, ramen dinners, and textbooks I bought used and resold before the ink on my highlighter dried. My parents didn't contribute a single dollar. No co-signature, no care package, no phone calls that lasted longer than the length of a request. I graduated with honors in accounting. They didn't come to the ceremony. My father said the drive was too long, it was 90 minutes. My mother said her allergies were acting up. Cole came. He drove himself, wearing a wrinkled button-down he probably borrowed, and handed me a card in the parking lot afterward. Inside, in his handwriting, I know they're not here. I'm proud of you, Mar. I kept that card in a drawer for over a decade. It was the one thing anyone in my family ever gave me that didn't come with an invoice attached later. After graduation, I passed the Certified Fraud Examiner exam, took a position doing internal audits for a regional insurance company, and got very, very good at tracing money through inflated claims, ghost vendors, and doctored receipts. I could spot a fabricated number in a stranger's paperwork from across a conference table. I never once looked at my own family's numbers that way. Family got the benefit of the doubt. Family got a blank column in my personal ledger labeled verified, a column I never once filled in month after month, year after year. That blank column would eventually cost me $191,000. By the time I was 29, I was earning close to $90,000 a year. My apartment was small and paid on time. My credit score sat above 800, and my parents' monthly requests had climbed to $800. My father's knee needed another round of physical therapy. My mother's blood pressure medication had gone up again. Every reason arrived with just enough specific, textured detail to sound real: a doctor's name, a pharmacy, a dollar figure that felt too oddly precise to be invented. I kept a spreadsheet, every transfer, every stated reason, date, amount, memo. It's an occupational habit. I track money the way some people count steps. Automatic, involuntary, but there was one column I never filled in: verified. It sat empty row after row, year after year. I once asked my father over Sunday dinner whether his insurance covered any of the physical therapy. He set his fork down and looked at me the way you look at someone who just insulted you at your own table. You think I'd ask if I had another way? His voice went quiet, wounded. Don't make this about paperwork, Mara. I apologized. I actually apologized for asking where $800 a month was going. That night I opened the spreadsheet again. The verified column stared back, blank. The running total at the bottom read $119,000. I told myself the column didn't matter. The reasons were probably true. My parents wouldn't lie to me. They wouldn't. The spreadsheet kept growing. The column stayed empty. I noticed the new kitchen the moment I walked in for Easter the following spring. Quartz counters, a farmhouse sink, new cabinets with soft close hinges that whispered shut instead of slamming. I remember running my palm along the cool stone before I could stop myself. I thought the truck payment was behind, I said. My father didn't blink. It's just family helping family, Mara, don't make it weird. My mother changed the subject to Cole's engagement. Cole was getting married. The ring on his fiancée's hand was a 2-carat emerald C. The kind of stone that photographs well and costs more than most people's first car. Cole worked part-time doing freelance video editing and had never held a steady job longer than 5 months. Nobody asked where that ring money came from. I didn't ask either. Christmas confirmed the pattern in a way that was almost funny in its bluntness. I arrived early, cooked the ham, cleaned the kitchen twice. I brought $500 in gift cards so everyone could pick whatever they wanted. My gift from the family was a discount store candle that smelled vaguely of pine and cost maybe $12. Cole opened noise-canceling headphones, a weekend trip voucher, and a new laptop. I sat there holding my candle and did a different kind of math, not dollars, but rank, where I stood, what I was worth in this house on a day that was supposed to be about worth. I noticed all of it, the quartz counters in a house that was barely making the mortgage, the 2-carat ring on a finger that had never earned a steady paycheck, the candle versus the laptop. And I told myself again, maybe things really are tight and I'm just more careful with money. Careful, another word for invisible. Cole's wedding was in September at a renovated barn venue with string lights and a live acoustic duo. The final cost, I would later confirm, was $48,000. I was not asked to be part of the wedding party. We kept it small, Cole's fiancée told me over text, a week after the invitations had already gone out to 2 college roommates and a coworker she'd known for 4 months. There was no room for the sister who had been keeping the family's lights on since she was 15. I sat at table 14 near the kitchen doors. I wore a dress I'd bought on clearance. That same month, my transfer to my parents was $1,100. My father said the wedding costs were killing them. I watched my little brother dance with our mother while our father cried into a folded napkin, the whole room glowing gold with candlelight paid for in part, with wire transfers labeled medical and emergency. The photographer stopped by my table near the end of the night and asked if I was a friend of the groom's from work. "I'm his sister," I said. He checked his shot list, looked confused, and moved on. I wasn't in a single family photo. I drove home at 11, my checking account $700 lighter than that morning. My name wasn't printed anywhere in the program. Earlier that evening, during the cocktail hour, an older cousin I barely knew had cornered me near the bar, clearly a few drinks in, and said, with the particular bluntness only distant relatives seem to have, "You must be so relieved your brother finally found someone to take care of him." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do with a sentence like that and asked what she meant. "Oh, you know," she said, waving a hand vaguely, "your parents always say you're the strong one, so it's nice Cole gets to just be happy for once." I excused myself to the restroom and stood at the sink for a full minute before I could make myself go back out to the reception floor. I sat in my car in my own parking lot for almost 10 minutes before I went inside. I know it was 10 minutes because I watched the dashboard clock, waiting for a feeling I couldn't name yet. The voice memo arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, 2:47 p.m. I was reviewing a batch of vendor invoices at my desk when Cole's text came in. "Don't be mad, just listen." An audio file, 40 seconds. The audio quality was rough. Cole's phone had clearly been sitting on a counter somewhere, picking up the hum of a dishwasher in the background. My father's voice came first, relaxed, almost bored. "She'll cover it, she always covers it." My mother laughed, that particular laugh light and pleased with itself. "She thinks it's love, it's a paycheck with a heartbeat." My father again, "She's too proud to ever say no, proud people are easy." More laughter. Then Cole's voice, quieter, asking what they were going to tell me the roof thing was this time. My father suggested a number, my mother suggested rounding it up since she never checks. I pulled the earbuds out. My hands were steady. My chest was not. On the second monitor, my personal spreadsheet sat open. 11 years, 132 months, $191,400. I had kept every transfer, every stated reason, recorded in the same format I use for professional fraud cases. The column labeled verified was still empty. I picked up my phone. Cole was clearly waiting for a reaction, tears maybe, or a long text he could quote back to our parents later, proof that he'd warned me and I'd overreacted. I typed one line. "I know now, I have proof." The typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I didn't wait for a reply. I closed the thread, set the phone face down, and opened a new spread. Sheet, same template I use for professional investigations. Subject field, Ellison, W&R, the audit had begun. $191,400, that's what I'd sent over 11 years. Monthly transfers with memo lines like knee therapy, furnace repair, insurance gap. I trace money for a living. I had spent a decade auditing everyone else's family while never once auditing my own. That was about to change. I spread everything across my kitchen table that evening: bank statements, wire confirmations, screenshots, a folder of printed emails I'd kept out of habit. 11 years, 132 months. Average transfer $1,450. I sorted first by year, then by stated reason: knee therapy, mortgage assistance, medication, wedding contribution, roof repair, car trouble. Each category got its own column. Then I started cross-referencing, the same way I would for any client: insurance filings against claim medical costs, county property records against claim mortgage balances, bank deposit timing against withdrawal timing. The process was identical to every case I'd ever worked. Only the subject line was different. It should have felt strange, typing my own last name into the header row I usually reserved for a shell company or an embezzling vendor. It did for about 10 minutes, then the numbers took over the way they always do. Numbers don't flinch. A $40,000 knee surgery claim is either backed by a medical bill or it isn't. A mortgage payment is either owed or it's already gone. I worked until nearly 2 in the morning that first night. By the time I closed my laptop, I had 6 claimed categories, 11 years of records, and 0 verified entries. The verification was about to begin. My father's knee surgery was real, I'll give him that much. He had the procedure in a regional hospital in 2016, and I still had residual access to an old shared insurance portal from years earlier, back when I was briefly listed as a dependent during my last year of college. The login still worked. I pulled the explanation of benefits: total billed amount $31,000, insurance paid $26,200, patient responsibility after copay and deductible $4,800. I had sent him $22,000 for that surgery over 8 months. The actual out-of-pocket cost was $4,800. The overage was $17,200. I stared at the screen the way I stare at any discrepancy that big in a professional file, except this time, sitting at my own kitchen table at 11 at night, the clinical distance I usually rely on felt very thin. I printed both documents, the insurance statement, my wire confirmation, and set them side by side. $22,000 sent, $4,800 owed, $17,200 unaccounted for. In a professional audit, this is the point where I'd flag the line item: discrepancy requires explanation. I already knew the explanation my father would give: it's just family helping family. But $17,200 doesn't evaporate into family helping family. Money goes somewhere. It buys something, or it sits somewhere waiting to be spent. That's the first rule they teach you in this line of work: money always leaves a trail. I highlighted the gap in yellow and moved to the next category. The surgery was real, the number attached to it was not. Next was the mortgage. My father had been requesting $600 a month to help keep us afloat on the house for years. I pulled the county recorder's website and searched the deed for their address on Maple Hollow Road. The original mortgage, held with a regional credit union, had a satisfaction of mortgage filed and stamped in November 2018. Paid in full, nearly 4 years before my most recent mortgage assistance transfer. I scrolled back through my own spreadsheet. After November 2018, I had sent $600 a month, labeled house help, for 41 consecutive months. 41 times 600, $24,600 for a mortgage that no longer legally existed. I printed the county filing, highlighted the satisfaction date in yellow, and set it beside the surgery documents. 2 categories audited, 2 confirmed fabrications, $41,800 in overpayment and outright invention, and I still had 4 more categories to go. I thought about every Sunday dinner where my father asked me to step onto the porch to talk privately about money because he said discussing it at the table in front of everyone embarrassed him. He wasn't embarrassed. He was managing the narrative. My father had told me repeatedly that he and my mother were paying for most of Cole's wedding and just needed help covering the overflow. I requested a copy of the venue contract through a moot Yule friend who'd worked event coordination there, framed as professional curiosity, which wasn't entirely a lie. The venue deposit and full balance, $48,000 total, had been paid in 3 installments, all from a single account, my parents' joint checking account. Deposit timing matched almost to the week 3 of my emergency transfers from that same year: $9,000 for a furnace, $6,000 for medical follow-up, $11,000 for an insurance gap on the house. $26,000 of my emergency money deposited into their account within days of matching withdrawals to the venue. I marked the wedding category substantially fabricated. I found the biggest piece on the county assessor's site almost by accident, searching my parents' names out of habit after the mortgage discovery. A second property, a one-bedroom condo 40 minutes south near a lake. Purchase date February of the previous year. Buyer Walter Ellison individual. Purchase price $98,000. Down payment $62,000 cash. I sat back in my chair. A condo, purchased in cash in large part while my father was telling me he couldn't cover a knee surgery copay or a mortgage payment on the house we all grew up in. I cross-referenced the purchase window with my own spreadsheet. In January and February of that year, my father had called twice. First, an emergency roof repair, $9,000. Second, a second opinion on the knee plus a deposit for a specialist, $7,500. I had sent both, $16,500 in 2 months, landing squarely inside the window of the condo purchase. The $62,000 down payment hadn't appeared overnight. It had accumulated year after year out of inflated surgery costs, a mortgage payment for a debt that no longer existed, fake tuition help for Cole's community college classes he'd stopped attending after 2 semesters, and a wedding fund my parents had let me believe was mostly theirs. I opened satellite view on my laptop. The condo sat on a small rise overlooking the water, a narrow dock extending out with a modest pontoon boat tied off at the end. On the little concrete patio, 2 Adirondack chairs, a small grill. This wasn't a fixer-upper. This was a retirement escape, built one wire transfer at a time, with money I had sent for surgeries and mortgage payments and emergencies that never existed. I saved the image, printed it, and added it to the stack that no longer looked like a family record. It looked like an exhibit file. One piece of paper made the whole picture undeniable for me. February 14th of the previous year, a wire transfer from my account, $7,500, memo line dad's knee, specialist deposit. A public escrow filing I located the following week showed a deposit of $7,500 into the condo's escrow account. Depositor, Walter Ellison. Date, February 17th. 3 days apart, same exact amount. My money left my account for a medical specialist who, according to the insurance portal, had never been scheduled. 3 days later, it was sitting in an escrow account for a condo I had never been told existed. That was the moment this stopped being suspicion and became evidence. I slid both documents into a protective sleeve. They would go first in the report. Page 1, Exhibit A, because if you want a room full of people to understand 11 years of fraud in under a minute, you don't start with a total. You start with 1 transfer and 1 deposit 3 days apart for the exact same number, telling 2 completely different stories. I searched civil fraud attorney Columbus, Ohio on my phone that same night and had a consultation booked within the week. Denise Whitfield's office was above a bakery downtown, and she'd been practicing civil litigation for almost 30 years. She read my file for close to 15 minutes without saying a word, made one low sound around the condo escrow page, and finally set the folder down and looked at me over her glasses. "This is fraud by false pretenses," she said, textbook. "I don't want criminal charges," I told her. "I want civil. We can pursue both eventually, civil first if that's your priority. You want the money back, not the satisfaction of a courtroom." She was right. Satisfaction was a luxury I couldn't afford to prioritize. The money was mine and I wanted it accounted for. She asked about the voicemail. I played it for her. She listened twice. "Ohio's a one-party consent state for recordings," she said. "Cole was a participant in that conversation. It's admissible." She made a note. "Who else has heard this?" "Just me. Keep it that way for now." Before I left her office that first day, Denise asked me a question no one else had bothered to ask through the entire process. "What do you actually want out of this, Mara? Not legally. P. Personally?" I sat with it for a moment. I told her I didn't want my parents to go to jail and I didn't need a public apology because I already knew one wasn't coming. I wanted the number to exist somewhere official, outside my own head and my own spreadsheet, a place where nobody could later tell me I'd imagined it, or exaggerated it, or that I was being dramatic about family helping family. I wanted the truth to have a case number. She nodded slowly, like that was an answer she respected more than the ones she usually got. "Then we build a file so clean nobody can argue with it," she said. "That's the job." Denise filed the civil complaint the following week, naming Walter and Renee Ellison as defendants, seeking $172,000, the total amount I could fully document as fraudulent out of the $191,400 I'd sent. The remaining $19,400 covered expenses I could actually verify as legitimate. We waited, and I kept building the report. Civil discovery is remarkably useful when you already know how to read a bank statement for a living. Denise subpoenaed my parents' full financial records. 3 weeks later, a banker's box of statements confirmed, line by line, everything I had already suspected. I built the full money map on a Saturday afternoon the way I'd build one for any professional client. Money in, money out, every dollar accounted for. Cole's wedding, $48,000 funded by transfers labeled medical and emergency. The condo down payment, $62,000 accumulated across 3 years of fabricated claims. My father's pontoon boat, $11,000 purchased 4 months after the condo closed. My mother's credit cards paid off in 4 separate lump sums totaling $21,000, each payment landing within days of one of my transfers. 2 vacations, one to the Gulf Coast, one to a resort out of state, totaling $14,000. Miscellaneous spending, furniture, a riding mower, a used camper, totaling roughly $15,000. I totaled the fraud column, $171,000. Out of $191,400 sent over 11 years, only about $20,000 had gone anywhere close to what I'd been told. Less than 11 cents of every dollar had done what the memo line claimed. I printed the full money map, highlighted every discrepancy, cross-referenced it against the subpoenaed bank records one final time. Every dollar had a trail. Every trail ended somewhere that wasn't a knee surgery or a mortgage payment. The picture was complete. Now I needed the frame. The report took just over 2 months to finalize, 44 pages. I wrote it exactly the way I write every professional forensic report, clinical, sourced, cross-referenced, no adjectives, no emotional language, just claims, evidence, and discrepancy. Section 1, the knee surgery claimed amount versus insurance record, with the $17,200 overage traced to the condo escrow account. Section 2, the mortgage county satisfaction filing from 2018, followed by 41 months of payments for a debt that had already been closed, totaling $24,600. Section 3, the wedding fund venue records against my emergency transfers, $26,000 matched almost to the week. Section 4, the condo purchase records, escrow deposits, and the February 14th to 17th documents at the center of the file. Section 5, additional expenditures, the boat, the credit cards, the vacations, the furniture. Every false claim was dated. Every entry carried 2 figures side by side, what they told me and what was real. Every discrepancy cited its source, a bank record, a county filing, an insurance statement, an escrow deposit slip. I bound 5 copies in dark green folders. Denise reviewed the final draft on a Thursday evening, reading, glasses low on her nose, coffee gone cold beside her. She set it down and shook her head slowly. In almost 30 years, I don't think I've seen a cleaner file for a case this personal. I had built reports like this for clients every month of my career, vendor kickbacks, inflated invoices, ghost employees. This one took 2 months longer than usual because every few pages I had to close the folder and remember how to breathe evenly. But the report itself didn't care about my breathing, it only cared about the numbers, and the numbers were ready. There was one more thing I did before I closed the report for good. Something that had nothing to do with the legal case and everything to do with the version of me that had spent a decade filling in every column except the one that mattered. I went back through the entire spreadsheet one final time, start to finish, and next to every single fabricated entry I typed the same word in the verified column, the column that had sat empty for 11 years. False, not blank anymore, not a question mark. A finding. It took less than an hour to fill in a column that had taken me 11 years to leave open, and something about finally closing it felt more permanent than the settlement itself would end up feeling. I also went back through old photos on my phone that same week, mostly out of a need to see the pattern laid out visually instead of just in numbers. 11 years of holiday photos, and in almost every single one I was the person standing slightly outside the frame holding a serving dish or a camera or someone else's coat. I wasn't looking for evidence anymore at that point. The case didn't need it. I think I was just finally letting myself see what had been true the entire time, now that I had permission to look at it plainly instead of explaining it away. The invitation came by a group text 3 weeks later. Walter and Renee's 30th wedding anniversary. First Saturday of October. Location, the condo. Guest list, over 50 people, extended family, church friends, neighbors from Maple Hollow Road, my parents' entire social circle. The message read, celebrating 30 years of love and family, can't wait to see everyone at the lake. I read it twice. 30 years of love celebrated in a home purchased with money taken from their daughter under the pretense of medical emergencies she'd never questioned closely enough. Cole texted separately the next day, "You coming should be a good one lol." I typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." He had no idea what that actually meant. I RSVP'd yes. Denise cleared her calendar for that weekend. I told no one else, explained nothing, and prepared quietly. The civil suit had already been filed but not yet formally served. Denise had agreed to hold service until after the party to avoid tipping my parents off before I was ready. The report was bound. The recording was saved in 3 separate places. I confirmed the condo's outdoor sound system connected over Bluetooth. I'd used it myself the one time I'd visited before I knew what the down payment on that patio had actually cost me. Everything else I would handle myself. The party would have a banner, champagne, a toast. My father would stand at the head of a table on a deck he'd bought with my money and tell 50 people how hard he and my mother had worked for everything they had. And then I would stand up with a dark green folder and a 40-second voicemail my own brother had sent me as a joke. The morning before the party, I drove out to the condo alone. Nobody was there yet. I let myself walk the property the way I walk through a client's balance sheet line by line, looking for exactly where the money had gone. The living room had a new leather sectional and a mounted television above an electric fireplace. The kitchen had granite countertops and a farmhouse sink identical, almost mockingly, to the one at the house on Maple Hollow Road, the one that was supposedly funded by a mortgage that had been paid off for 6 years. The bedroom faced the water, a king bed, a walk-in closet, a bathroom with a soaking tub. The second bedroom had a queen bed and a dresser that still smelled faintly of new wood, Cole's weekend room, judging by a phone charger left on the nightstand. Out back, the deck, the Adirondack chairs from the satellite image, string lights already strung for the following day, a small gas grill. At the dock, the pontoon boat rocked gently against its mooring. I stood there a long time. Every board under my feet had been paid for by a wire transfer with a lie written into the memo line. I sat down for a minute in one of the Adirondack chairs just to see what it felt like. The wood was still slightly damp from the morning, and from that angle you could see straight down the length of the dock to the water, calm and gray-green under an overcast sky. It really was a beautiful spot. That was the strange, quiet cruelty of it. Nothing about the place looked stolen. It looked earned. It looked exactly like what my father had described in every phone call for years. A family finally getting ahead after decades of hard work. Except the hard work had been mine, done in 15-minute increments between shifts and coursework and audits, and none of it had ever once been meant to buy me a chair by a lake. I took photographs of every room, the dock, the boat, the view, and drove home. The tears had already happened months earlier alone at 2 in the morning with a spreadsheet open. What was left now was the work. Saturday morning was clear and cool. I arrived at 10, 2 hours before the first guests. Out of an old habit I hadn't fully unlearned, the steady daughter showing up early to carry chairs. My mother was in the kitchen arranging a charcuterie board. She glanced at me and didn't smile. I smiled anyway because some habits take longer to break than others. "Need help, W?" "With the tables?" I asked. She pointed toward the garage without a word. I carried folding chairs out to the deck in 11 trips, counting each one because counting kept my hands steady. Denise arrived at 11:15 in a dark blazer, carrying a leather folio. She chose a seat near the outdoor speaker mounted on the deck railing, connected her phone to the Bluetooth system, and ran a quick, nearly inaudible test tone. She caught my eye across the deck and gave a small, deliberate nod. Guests filled the yard and deck through the early afternoon. Aunts, uncles, cousins, church friends, neighbors from the old street, Cole and his wife. By 2 o'clock there were more than 50 people holding paper plates and plastic champagne flutes. A banner stretched between 2 porch posts, 30 years of love. The lake caught the light behind it. The boat rocked gently at the dock. Everything looked beautiful. Everything had been stolen. And everyone who mattered to my parents was standing right there to see it. The toast came at 3. My father stood at the head of the long deck table, champagne raised, sunlight behind him, looking healthier and more relaxed than a man who'd claimed 2 rounds of knee surgery and a chronic mortgage crisis had any business looking. 30 years, he said, and the crowd quieted. Renee and I built this from nothing. We worked hard. We raised 2 good kids. Everything you see here, this house, this lake, this family, we built it ourselves with our own 2 hands. My mother squeezed his arm, eyes shining. Cole raised his glass. To Mom and Dad. The crowd cheered. My father smiled wide, surveying his deck, his lake, his condo, surrounded by people who believed every word he'd just said. Now, he continued, warm and easy, I'd like my daughter to say a few words. He looked at me with the exact expression I'd grown up under, the one that expected gratitude, that expected the steady daughter to stand, cry a little, and thank her parents for everything they'd sacrificed. 50 faces turned toward me. I stood. My father handed me the microphone with a small wink. I took it in one hand. The green folder was already in my other hand. I'd retrieved it from my bag by the front door during the toast while everyone's attention was on him. Nobody had noticed. I held the microphone in one hand and the folder in the other. 50 people, one long table, a banner that read 30 years of love, a lake full of afternoon sun, and a boat purchased with money my father told me was for a knee that never needed a second surgery. I opened my mouth and did the thing I'm actually good at. I presented the findings. My voice stayed level, the same tone I use presenting to a client's board of directors. No tremor, just data. Thank you, Dad. I want to talk for a minute about what actually built this place, because you're right, someone built it. I let that sentence sit in the air. My father's smile stayed fixed, but something behind his eyes had already started recalculating. $191,400, I said. That's what I've sent this family over the last 11 years. The deck went silent, not polite silence, but the specific, airless silence of a room that just heard a number it wasn't ready for. Monthly transfers averaging just over $1,400. Memo lines like knee therapy, mortgage help, emergency repair. I opened the folder and set the first page on the table, the 11-year summary, 132 entries, every date and amount printed in small, precise rows. My father's champagne flute lowered slowly to his side. Mara, my mother said from her seat, this isn't the time. You've had 11 years of my time, Mom. I need 5 minutes. Her mouth closed. Somewhere at the back, a fork clinked against a plate and stopped. I could feel dozens of eyes doing their own quiet math already. I turned the page. The knee surgery, I said. Insurance shows a patient responsibility of $4,800. I sent $22,000. I held up the insurance statement, highlighted in yellow. But first, I want everyone to hear something my brother sent me. I nodded to Denise. She pressed play. The outdoor speakers carried my parents' voices across the whole deck and down toward the water. My father's loose and amused, she'll cover it, she always covers it. A gasp rippled through the crowd, then my mother's, bright with laughter, she thinks it's love, it's a paycheck with a heartbeat. Several people actually stepped back as if the sound itself had physical weight. My mother's face drained white. She gripped the edge of the table. Turn that off. My father didn't move. He stood there, flute still in hand, staring at the speaker like it had personally betrayed him. I let it run another few seconds, my father naming the next fabricated expense, Cole laughing faintly in the background, then nodded at Denise. He stopped it. The silence that followed pressed against the whole deck like weather. I looked at my mother. I can't turn it off, Mom. It's the most honest thing you've said about me in years. I turned back to the folder and kept going, voice steady. My father claimed a $31,000 surgery. Insurance covered all but $4,800. The other $17,200 went here. I held up the escrow deposit slip. This condo, purchased last year, $62,000 down payment, funded entirely by money I sent for emergencies that didn't exist. I set the documents down where the front table could see them clearly. The mortgage on the Maple Hollow house was paid off in 2018. After that date, I was asked for and sent mortgage help for 41 more months, $24,600 for a debt that no longer existed. You don't know what you're talking about, my father said, his voice cracking down the middle. I'm a fraud examiner, Dad. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I turned another page. Cole's wedding, $48,000, 26 of it traced directly to transfers I sent labeled medical and emergency, deposited into your account within days. I glanced at Cole. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at his shoes. The boat, the credit cards, 2 vacations. Total documented misuse, $171,000. My father moved, not toward me, toward the folder on the table. Denise rose from her chair, calm and unhurried. I'm Denise Whitfield, attorney for Ms. Ellison. A civil complaint has already been filed in Franklin County. This document is Exhibit A. I'd strongly advise you not to touch it. My father froze, hands still extended, inches from the pages. He drew it back slowly like he'd reached toward something hot. Somewhere behind him, an older woman, my mother's own sister, said quietly but clearly, "Renee, why'd you scream to turn off your own voice?" No one answered her. A man near the back of the deck, a family friend I barely recognized, had quietly lifted his phone, camera angled toward the table. I didn't ask him to stop. I closed the folder, gathered my bag, and looked around the deck one last time. "I'm not asking anyone here to take a side," I said. "I'm just giving you the numbers. The numbers don't take sides either." I walked to the front door. Denise fell into step beside me. Behind us, a chair scraped hard against the deck boards. Something crashed against a wall, my father, from the sound of it. Near the driveway, I glanced back once. One corner of the banner had come loose from its tack and was flapping loosely in the lake wind. 30 years of love, half of it hanging by a single thread. The settlement came 10 days later. My father's attorney, a young associate from a small local practice, called Denise on a Monday morning and used the word resolution 4 separate times in one phone call. Denise's terms were firm. $140,000 repaid over 4 years, secured by a lien against the condo. 2 missed consecutive payments and the property would go to auction. My father agreed the same afternoon. He sold the pontoon boat within the week to fund the first installment, $11,000 for a boat he'd owned less than a year. Bought with money that was supposed to have gone toward a surgery he never actually needed a second round of. My mother signed without saying a word, according to Denise, who said she never once looked up from the page. Cole's marriage didn't survive the fallout, though it wasn't only about the money. His wife told a mutual cousin who told my aunt, who eventually told me, that she'd asked him one question after the party: "What else did your parents spend her money on that you knew about?" He didn't have an answer that satisfied her. The extended family split the way families in small communities usually do, not cleanly, but thoroughly. Some people called what I did brave. Some called it cruel and said so at church potlucks I wasn't invited to. My parents stopped attending most of the family gatherings they used to host. Nobody had to say why. The recording had already made its way through most of the county on its own, replayed off someone's phone speaker at more than one kitchen table. The civil case settled without ever going to trial. $140,000 on a fixed schedule, not the full $171,000 I could have pursued. Denise told me juries can be sympathetic in unpredictable ways when family is involved. I told her $140,000 and a closed door was worth more to me than $171,000 and a decade of appeals. A local paper's community section picked up a watered-down version of the story a few weeks later, filed under a headline about a family financial dispute settled in civil court, no names beyond initials. Someone forwarded it to me anyway, as if I hadn't lived every paragraph of it already. I read it once, closed the tab, and went back to the client file I'd been working on before the notification interrupted me. It struck me, reading those careful, sanitized 200 words, how small the printed version looked next to 11 years of my actual life. The numbers were accurate. The rest of it, the porch light off on a winter night, the candle, table 14, the note that said "Don't wake us," none of that fits into a community section item. It only fits into the version I get to tell myself on my own terms whenever I'm ready to. My first full paycheck with no transfer going out felt like setting down a suitcase I'd been carrying through an airport for 11 years without realizing how heavy it had gotten. I opened a savings account, not joint, not linked to anyone, just mine, and watched the number sit there, untouched, unclaimed by anyone but me. I started eating dinner at an actual restaurant on Friday nights instead of takeout eat and standing over the sink between transfers. I went to a professional mixer Denise invited me to and met someone who runs a nonprofit helping fraud victims rebuild their finances. She asked if I'd ever consider speaking to their group sometime. I told her I'd think about it, and I meant it. I changed my phone number. Cole is blocked for now, though I haven't decided if that's forever. My parents have Denise's office number for legal matters only. If they need to reach me, there's a channel, but the channel has a gatekeeper now, and the gatekeeper bills by the hour. The first of the month came and went with no wire transfer, no phone call asking for one. My banking app showed a number that grew instead of shrinking. For the first time in 11 years, the first of the month was just a date on a calendar, nothing more. On a quiet Sunday morning, I sat at my own kitchen table with coffee in a mug I'd bought myself at a farmer's market. Uneven glaze, slightly crooked handle, exactly the kind of thing nobody else would have picked out for me. My laptop was open to an actual client file, a vendor kickback scheme at a mid-sized logistics company. Good, honest work. The kind of work that pays because someone out there needs the truth pulled carefully out of a set of numbers, and I happen to be very good at that particular thing. My phone buzzed, an old friend I hadn't talked to in years asking about coffee on Saturday. Saturday works, I typed back, no guilt attached to the reply, no invoice waiting behind it, no memo line hiding a lie, just coffee with someone who wanted my company and nothing else. I closed the laptop, rinsed my mug, set it on the rack to dry. The kitchen table was clean, the spreadsheet was closed. The green folder now lives in a filing cabinet at Denise's office, referenced by a case number instead of a family name. Outside, the morning was still and a little cold, the kind of quiet that used to make me anxious because it usually meant a call was coming. No call came. The day belonged to me, just me. Family support is supposed to move in more than one direction. The moment you realize you're the only one holding up your end of it, you're not supporting a family anymore, you're financing someone else's story about themselves. And the hardest audit any of us will ever run isn't the one at work. It's the one on the people who taught us that love and obligation are supposed to feel exactly the same. A wire transfer meant for a surgery that became a lake house down payment. A voicemail my own brother sent me as a joke. A 44-page report that became Exhibit A at a 30th anniversary party. If you've ever been told your help was just family being family, while someone else was busy spending it on granite countertops and a boat, share this with the person who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next story. End.